People who have gone out for a pack of cigarettes and never went back to your family. What happened after you left? Didn't leave my wife and kids as I don't have any, but I did walk out on my mother and siblings without any notice. Dad was not in the picture. After? Best decision of my life. My mother refuses treatment for her very serious mental illness or illnesses and was incredibly abusive physically as well and neglectful while I was growing up. I saw the effect it had: burn out older siblings with no motive or drive and instead embraced the crazy just to feel sane in the toxic family home we lived in. I was homeless for about a year and a half, living out of a duffel and bumming food from friends. I feel like my life hasn't even started until I left it behind. I feel like it held me back for 17 years and I now am finally being able to find out who I am. Mom never came looking for me. I reconnected with my estranged father, whom I learned was in the military from the moment he was 18 until he was HD at 43. He has severe PTSD from his 3 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. He's now getting his master's in outdoors leadership, which I believe is a perfect way to use his massive skill set. I don't see him much if ever, but at least I know some blood is still thicker than water. My mom just all of a sudden wasn't there anymore. She and my dad were miserable, but my dad wouldn't agree to divorce. He was a minister at a big church and didn't believe divorce was right, and so instead he tried to stay married to my mom, all while avoiding her and all the unhappiness at home. She never really left her bedroom. She was miserable and she made everyone else miserable, too. She was horrible to me in those last few years. We had been really close before that. She started moving stuff out of the house little by little when no one was home. Like, one day a bookshelf would be gone. And we'd all notice but just kind of go on with our lives. And it bothers me very much, but her moving out was so abrupt and so ambiguous, that I don't remember specifics about it. Like, I don't know if it was during the school year or over summer, I don't know where I was or what was different when I came home that day, but at some point, she didn't live there anymore. I was 14. My dad told me that God told him she would never come back. I looked up to my dad a lot. He was kind of on the same level as God in my mind, so I believed him. He soon after started dating another woman, secretly because the church didn't know he was divorced yet. He intended to marry her as soon as possible. I remember I had to pose for family photos with this new woman and her 2 kids. They were printed up and put into a frame and hung over our fireplace. Then one day, my mom came to the house. She told me she had made the biggest mistake of her life, that she loved me, and my brother and my dad, and she wanted to work everything out. I guess God was wrong when he spoke to my dad. Then she walked out of my room and saw the new family portrait over the fireplace. She left quickly. A few days later, she called the house. My dad answered, and she told him to tell the kids I said goodbye. Then she hung up. We started calling everyone we could think to call. We tried to call the phone operator, asking if they could trace the call. This was 1995, so no caller ID or cell phone with a callback number. A bit later that night, my new stepmom-to-be came over and pulled my dad aside. She saw a car at the end of our neighborhood that looked like my mom's. My dad called 911. Everyone showed up. My mom had taken a bucket of pills. She was barely alive. They took her to the ER and pumped her stomach and intubated her. They told my dad to call my brother so he could come say his goodbyes too. I was let into the room for a while. I looked at the machines and they were plugged into the wall, and I stared for a long time thinking I should unplug it because she really didn't want to be revived and I couldn't understand why we were doing all of this. But then a nurse came in and said I had to leave while they did stuff. My mom survived. My dad married the other lady. I think this messed me up and I honestly can't believe I've typed up this entire recollection. I don't think about it very often and maybe that's why I can't remember the details of the day I realized she'd moved out. My real dad ghosted like 4 families. His first family, he had a son. He was in that family for 13 years. His son had a motorcycle wreck and ended up in intensive care. A year later he ghosted that family and moved to a new state. Just up and left, didn't take anything but his clothes and his car. Second family, he had a daughter. He left almost immediately. Then he moved to another state, and married another woman, and had 2 more kids whom I've never met or spoken to. Don't even know their names. TBH. Jake? John? Jordan? Josh? Something with a J. He went out for a pack of smokes and never went back, his own words. Then he met my mom, and had my sister first. He ghosted my mom 3.2 years later, then showed up for some quick whoopee, and I happened. He ghosted her, but didn't leave the state. She called the cops and my first memory is of the cops bringing my dad to the house in cuffs and letting him go, only for him to attack my mom while she was holding me and she dropped me. Then the cops arrested him. He wanted out, he got out. He had 2 more marriages, but no kids. It's his mo to shack up with well-off women and mooch until they either kick him out or he gets bored. It's really fucking painful to see, because I wanna be an ass-wiping dad who's there for his kids every fucking second of their lives. I wanted to be the exact opposite of him. For us, it was that he went out for milk. Dad told me as the eldest surviving kid I was the man of the house until he got back, so it was my obligation to help/defend/take care of them for him until he came back. He never came back. I was 10 years old when my mom and dad split up. We had been expecting it, but I didn't know that my mom had packed up suitcases for herself, my sister, and I. One day we went to school like everything was normal, and went to my mom's parents after school. It wasn't unusual for us to have dinner there. But then mom sat us down and told us we'd be staying there for a while. Ended up being 6 years before we got our own place. I never got to go back to my bedroom again. My dad got remarried and his wife's daughter moved in and repainted my room. When I had to visit them I slept on the couch while she slept in my room. This is my throwaway. Got married right out of high school, everything was going well but we were young and both were our first partners. Came home early one day and walked in on my wife with another man. Standard insanity ensued, followed by her begging for forgiveness and we went to months of counseling. Everything seemed well and dandy, she seemed like a totally different woman and couldn't live without me. One day I log into our desktop PC and her Facebook is loaded and there are multiple messages and I had to look. I found exactly what I knew I would find. It crushed me but I acted like nothing happened. That weekend I packed up my favorite clothes and belongings that meant a lot to me and snuck them to the car. Sunday evening I said, "Hey, I'm going to take the dogs to the dog park and hike for a few hours." When I left, I texted our neighbor to see if anyone showed up at the house. She replied pretty quickly that a male visitor was by very quickly. I told her goodbye and the dogs and I just drove. I had a decent savings and thought fuck it, start off somewhere new, and that is what I did. My ex-wife didn't even try and contact me until around lunchtime the next day. When I didn't respond, she blew me up with photos and videos of her with multiple men and about how bad of a lover I was. It fucked me up but I just kept trucking. I ended up in a smaller town where I saw someone was hiring for my trade. Years later, I remarried to the best human ever. When I was 18, I moved out from my abusive father. I was commuting to college at the time and I had morning classes, so the night before I packed my car with as much of my stuff as I could, and set off. One of my professors that I regularly talked to after class noticed that my car was full of clothes and asked if everything was okay. Over lunch I explained my situation, and he offered to take me in. I had already made arrangements to live with my mother. After my classes for the day were over I went home for the first time since I was a child to live with my mother. I slept on the couch for months before getting my own bed, and we didn't always have the money to eat, but we made it work. I have seen my father one time since then because he swore to me that he had changed. That night he proceeded to get wasted and tried to put his hands on me. I haven't seen him since, and I have no regrets. That's all for today's video. If you liked it, make sure to subscribe and let us know what you want to see next. Also, check us out on Twitter @ThatWasFunny. Thanks for watching. Until next time.